Hello, guys. Welcome back to another live episode of Visa Franchise YouTube channel with Patrick Findaro, our founding co-founder. Patrick, how's it going?
Doing well, Alaattin. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Today, we will be talking about a very popular idea of buying and already running business for $100 to $150,000 in the US, getting the E2 visa, and boarding the ship to start living the American dream. So we want to first of all talk about how viable this idea is and maybe work on some of the expectations and try to level some expectations, talk about some risks, and really and truly, if it is possible, under what circumstances would that be possible? We're going to talk about that and also go through the infamous biz buy sell. And let's see what kind of options are out there and question the viability a little bit, scrutinize it, have the position of a visa officer. Let's look at it from the perspective of a visa officer and ask for questions that our clients would be subject to potential scrutinies. I do believe that there'll be a lot of value for those who are watching. So if you guys can give the video a like right now as we speak to sort of like boost its engagement a little bit and type in your questions, would like to, pose our rundown and answer your questions as we go. All right, sounds fair? All right, Patrick, let's get it going. I mean, Patrick, you've been in this industry for over a decade now, and with Visa franchise for about 10 years, and then, with investment migration firms, especially for EB5 for some time. I'm pretty sure you've been hearing this idea floating about. And I'd like to get your thoughts on how viable this idea is. And first of all, why people would come up with this idea. Buy a business 100K, get the E2 visa, and immigrate to the US.
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's a lot of information online with the substantiality requirement for the E2 visa, where there's no minimum. But in our experience, talking to former consulate officers, staffers at the consulates, immigration attorneys in our network, under 80K in certain consulates, even under 100, 120K in certain consulates, the application is going to be heavily scrutinized. So thus the number is more or less set at 100,000. And of course, there are exceptions. We've had cases approved, to my knowledge, as low as 60,000, maybe a little lower than that, but I know definitely 60,000. But the 100K, there's a little more credibility when you show that you've spent $100,000 in the U.S. economy, and you've bought marketing services, maybe bought a vehicle for your business, or you've just acquired a business that's valued at $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. So thus the 100,000 is a nice round number that and it hasn't been indexed for inflation. I could see we had another chat about that with Trump. Maybe he has some policy memo go out to the consulates to get a little tighter on the substantiality requirement for the E2. But thus far, we have our money back guarantee set at 100,000 for our clients or E2 visa purposes, and it's set like that for a reason.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely seeing the six figures there adds a bit more weight to the application itself. And yes, of course, you are always subject to scrutiny. There's no getting away from that. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. But Patrick, talk to me a little bit about the viability of the idea of buying an existing business for 100K.
Yeah, I mean, so most people that are investing $100,000 are either starting their own independent business or starting a franchise business. In terms of buying an existing business, maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was more common, 100,000, but inflation has eaten up the dollar like it has in a lot of currencies around the world. Where for an existing business, 100,000 doesn't get you much. And if a business is for sale for $100,000, it's doing less than $100,000 for the owner, could be like $40,000. And that might not hit one of the other requirements for the E2 visa, which is the marginality requirement. Is your investment basically providing for more than for you and your family, whether that's through net income compensation to you as the business owner, and or job creation, having a lot of Americans that you're supporting through this endeavor. So, a small business for 100K that maybe the owner made 30,000 and you're buying that, but it has 15 American employees, and it has high revenue, but the margins are super tight. That might be eligible for the E2 visa. But if it's a business that doesn't make much money and it's just 2 employees, you might have difficulty satisfying the marginality requirement for the E2 visa. So at times it's better just to start fresh, and whether it's your own independent startup, franchise, or maybe you just do an asset sell, and it was a restaurant before, you're just buying the assets and you're launching your new restaurant, but it's not relying on anything from that prior restaurant. You're basically starting with a clean slate, but you already have the place built out, but you're going to change the name, and it's essentially a new business, but you're buying the assets, the furniture, fixtures, and everything.
Yeah, I mean, we see that asset sales work, but around 100K. So, for example, if somebody started an endeavor and they already spent 250, 300K, couldn't run it, now it's basically sale, and you get in there, seize the opportunity, and buy the business for 100K, but it's not running properly in its current shape or form. So you might want to invest a bit more, right? Maybe another 50K, maybe another $100,000 to sort of like get it up from the ground and get it going. So a concept like that, I believe, could work. However, I guess the reason where this idea stems from, Patrick, is when you put yourself in the shoes of an E2 investor. Ultimately, you're coming from another country. You don't have a credit score here in the US. You don't know the local rules and regulations, as it is different for every state and every city. You never done business in the US before, and it's a big ask. It is pretty risky. So the idea would be is that, okay, why don't I buy something that's already working? I don't really care about how much money that makes for the time being, but it's going to get me the visa, and it's going to keep going, and I'll take it from there. That is basically the chain of thought.
Well, you can do it, especially if you already have experience like buying businesses. Like there's a guy that owns a coffee shop near our office, Alaattin, that he worked in finance, investment banking, and he knows how to like do due diligence on very large companies, and applied that skill to buy a small coffee shop. Basically, it's almost like big espresso cart. And his idea was to buy this one, then expand. But he did the due diligence himself. He has experience doing that. If you don't
Yeah.
have experience doing a due diligence, it easily can be 5, 10, 20K each time you go through the numbers, bring in the accountant. So that can kind of eat away a lot of your investment, where you might have to do that for 2 or 3 times. And all of a sudden it's 100K, but you have 40K of professional fees. And that's just for an investment of 100,000 doesn't really make sense. It's all eaten up in the transaction costs. So if you already have experience buying businesses, and you have time on your hands, because it takes a long time. We just had an approval for a client that did a franchise resale, but it was a multi-year process. I think 18 months, maybe 20 months. Took a lot of time to looking at resale businesses for sale in that area, negotiating with the seller, checking the financials, doing that a few times around. All of a sudden, you're at 18 months, 20 months, where if you do, an own independent startup or buy a franchise, 3 to 6 months, 8 months tops, it shouldn't take that much time to be able to secure the E2 visa. So if you're already here, time is on your hands, you have experience, it can make sense to buy an existing business to secure the E2 for you and your family. But if that doesn't fit, then I'd probably recommend to go with a franchise business, especially if you've never started a business before or you're not already selling into the US market.
Thanks, Patrick. Let's make this an interactive session where we have a couple questions, one from Tiago and the other one from Thomas. Let's start with Tiago. Good afternoon. Will interviews at consulates be tougher, and have the rules changed for the E2 visas?
They could be. I don't recognize a shift in the first Trump administration. Um, I mean, if you had a legitimate business, you got approved, unless you were, a criminal or had prior U.S. immigration related problems. The approval rate's been pretty standard, for the Trump first term under Biden, now Trump again. It's fluctuated between like 85 and 93%. So, do I think it's going to get a lot stricter? No. I think just focus on like you being able to get into a business and really enjoy it and make money from it, and leave the visa work to us and our team for the business plan and the independent attorney that we bring in for the strategy and the filing.
Thanks, Patrick. Another question from Thomas Jameson. How much does the success of the business matter in getting the E2 visa renewed? Like, what if I don't make a profit the first year? Thanks.
That's a good question.
When did Amazon started making profit?
Yeah, exactly. It's generally provided. You provide a 5-year business plan. Most passports, most citizenships provide a 5-year E2 because it's a reciprocity schedule. So if Patrick, I'm going to move to Taiwan to open up a business, I can get an E2 equivalent visa in Taiwan, and they give it for 5 years. If I were to move to Egypt, though, they give the entrepreneur visa 3 months for me. If I was to move to Switzerland, they give me a 4-year entrepreneur visa. So there's a reciprocity schedule. So the renewal in practice, if you only have a 1-year visa, if the business is going really well, they're probably going to waive the interview, where you can just send your passport, go through the admin, and get the visa issued, deal with the courier to get your passport back. But if your business isn't going so hot, and you applied for the visa, and there's some countries that it's just a 1-year E2 visa, like Chile, they might want to see you face to face and talk about what's going on in the business and why you aren't hitting the 5-year target if it was too aggressive, in terms of saying after the first year you were making 80,000 where you're making 10,000, and that's perfectly acceptable. I've had businesses where it takes 3 years to break even. We don't want to have that for your E2 visa business, but there's some technology businesses, like you mentioned Amazon, generally 5-7 years, but people make a lot of money from the exit, and they can make, after that they have a really competitive moat. But it's going to depend. But the renewals in 5 years, you have time to adjust and to either have a lot of Americans hired. That could be W-2 employees. That's a tax form. W-2 is a tax form for an employee in the United States, or a 1099 contractor. So if you have some healthy mix of that, 5, 10, 15, and you're going in the renewal, the business isn't making much money, I think you stand a really good shot to get the E2 visa renewed.
So we got around 20 people watching, and 12 are on YouTube, and we only have 4 likes. Guys, let's just hit the button. Let's get the word out. Just give the video a like, and let's make sure it is promoted so more people can join and benefit and ask questions, and you benefit from their questions, just like Torres' question. He says, Patrick, what do you think to open E2? What do you think E2 real estate? What do you think about opening an E2 visa real estate brokerage to spend $100,000 with rent, an office, furniture, car, website, and for marketing? I will hire a real estate agent with license to work at the office? Very popular question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of a state that you can just like parachute in and get a brokerage license. Like in Florida, you get the sales associate license, which is essentially the real estate agent, and then you have to hang that license at a brokerage. And then I believe it's after 24 months you can then apply to be a broker. But you can't just come down from Canada or up from Mexico and start running a real estate brokerage firm. They want you, the regulatory agencies at the state level, that are generally, it's like professional services regulations. They want the realtors to learn on the job with a broker and to be compliant. So I'm not aware of a state that you can do that legally, run a brokerage without already having been a sales associate, a real estate agent for at least 2 years. What many of our clients will do real estate related businesses. So it could be like staging for selling a home. It could be real estate property management, either short-term rentals or long-term rentals. If you're used to just pure brokerage, though, it's a very different game. Real estate property management on the long-term rentals, it takes time to really build your book of business, start making money. And short-term rentals, there's plenty of issues, especially certain jurisdictions in terms of where you can Airbnb or not Airbnb. So if you want to be selling properties, maybe it's best that your spouse invests in a franchise, and then you can just focus on being a sales agent. The E2 visa spouse, you can work anywhere.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Another question here from Amit Dolat. He goes, I'm from Pakistan, residing in Dubai. If I want to acquire a business that is above 250,000 US dollars, but I want to use things like SBA loan, how will that happen if I don't have any credit history in the US? Now, that's a very good question. You don't necessarily need a credit score to acquire a loan, right? Unless you're willing to pay 30%, 40% interest rates. This goes generally for a car, for house purchase. When it comes to business and business loans, for legitimate loans like SBA and also from the bank, you generally need about a 2-year history of running the business, so they can actually look at the numbers and the track record and see if the business is viable, if the business is bankable. You may not be, but if the business is bankable, and how much assets does the business own. So there are such considerations. Obviously, it would be best if you don't plan, if you're not betting on an SBA loan, right? Maybe down the line, sure. Right out of the gate, it could be a little unpleasant, but it is doable. It is doable. However, there are some conditions and there are certain things to consider for the E2 visa. And I'm going to throw the ball here at Patrick to sort of shed some light on how can somebody get the SBA loan and apply for the E2 visa.
So unfortunately, financing is very limited for people that aren't green card holders already in the US or US citizens. And even if you have an American partner, no foreigner can have more than 25%. So you can't get the E2 visa through that business and get the financing. So I would say, don't waste your time looking to get financing for a business acquisition if you don't already have a green card, as you're going to be spending a lot of time talking to banks, financial consultants that maybe don't know the full rules. And there are certain exceptions where if you're already working for the business and you're on an E2 visa, I believe it's for after a year, like you're the manager, then you can get the SBA loan, or maybe you were the spouse working at the business. But as a non-green card holder, the financing paths are really limited for these small businesses. It's different, like if you're raising capital for a startup and you're going to Silicon Valley and you have this new app. Very different. You're raising equity financing generally, and there's plenty of venture capitalists that have risk tolerance. But for commercial lenders that are relying on the SBA to basically guarantee 85% of the debt. It's not allowed to go to E2 visa holders in most circumstances.
Thanks for that information, Patrick. Another question we have here from Ozge Mejuk.
As a fellow Turk, is your friend
I, I,
Alaattin?
I believe so. I believe so. If that's the case, then her name is Özge rather than Ozge.
Okay.
But Mejuk, I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah,
Well, maybe
Mejuk.
there should be like that little C. What do you call that?
Mechuk. Ch. It's my last name too. It's not Kilik. It's Kılıç.
Kılıç.
But I don't know if that's the pronunciation. But anyway, she goes, "Hi, thanks for the information you've been sharing. Thank you, Özge. I hope you liked the video. If you have done so, please click the button." She wants some information about the E1 visa. What do you think about it? And I know it needs a substantial amount of trade volume between the US and the other counterpart.
Well, this is timely, and I encourage her to check out the video we did with Yair from Lende, who came here on an E1 visa, and he basically had a company in Israel that was providing that provided the IP and tech to the U.S. Affiliate. So he was able to show trade every time there was a mortgage transaction, crediting back to Israel, and he could come as the principal, the owner of the business, as well as he's brought over a bunch of employees that also have an Israeli passport. So if you're doing business between Turkey and the US, whether it's providing a service or physical product, you can come over as yourself, the principal, the owner of that business, as well as also bring over other people that have Turkish passports. So in terms of trade, in our experience, $20,000-$30,000 a month. And there's a track record of at least 3-6 months of that. And there's multiple transactions. So it's not just providing one monthly payment of $20,000 because you have one client in the United States that you're providing a service for. There should be generally more transactions, but it's really underrated visa. And the benefit with the E1 visa is that you don't have to have an investment. It's just based on the trade, the products and services that are going back and forth.
It's great. By the way, she is Turkish. That's beautiful. Cool. All right. We have another question from Hubert Mosior. And really quickly, Patrick, please address that question, and then we will be carrying on with our pre-planned schedule. Is it possible to start a business for E2 visa? And once the business is up and running and employing, let's say a manager and 3 other employees, is it possible to apply for EB1C green card? Very good question, Hubert. Thanks for that.
Alaattin, before you joined our company, we did a bunch of these EB1Cs. I can think of 30 plus before COVID that were helping people secure the EB1C, but it's a multi-step process. So you have to go USAS, then you go to the consulate, you have the foreign company, because you have to have a company abroad that you've been employed at for at least one of the prior 3 years. And that foreign company should, have a management structure, managers of managers. So effectively both sides, say you're moving from Canada, the Canadian company has 8 or more employees, the US company has 8 or more employees. A lot of Canadians want to sell their company, or they're not confident that they're going to maintain the jobs. So we don't do many EB1Cs now. We generally focus on some other more talent green card categories like the EB1A or the EB2NIW that more rely on you as the entrepreneur, leveraging your background and how you're going to continue growing this business. Or we've had some franchisee clients that, like I can think of one that was a senior executive at a multinational company. He invested in a franchise, he kicked ass here in Florida. And then he did for his green card, the proposed endeavor was more related to what he was doing in the past and offering consulting services related to that. So every case, it's really case by case. And, I haven't had generally the E2 visa is issued for 5 years. There's plenty of clients that want to spend some time here, whether they're coming from Chile, Turkey, their kids become fluent in English, and then they go back home, and they don't want to obtain a green card. And then we have plenty of clients that they really want to stay here indefinitely. And if you decide, in the first year or two on the E2 visa, you want to stay here indefinitely, if you put your mind to it and you allocate the time and energy needed to the business and your personal profile, there's a few different green card options. So we've been successful across the gamut for clients that give us enough time and we can work with them to secure a green card. Generally, they don't have to renew the E2 visa if it was issued for that 5-year tenor, which is the most cases.
Okay, very good. Let's address Suchit's question too, and then we carry on. Does a software resale business qualify for E2 visa? For example, becoming a reseller of a software company like Oracle or Microsoft and sell their software to different businesses.
I don't see why not. I mean, they're pretty transparent in terms of what qualifies, and all the consulate officers across the US have this super fancy document, the Foreign Affairs Manual, the FAM, where everything's dictated for the E2 visa and the E1 as well together in this. And if you meet the requirements, there's a treaty that exists between the country you hold a citizenship for and the US. So say you're coming from Pakistan or Canada, yes, there's a treaty. You have the treaty, yes. Have you invested? Are you in the process of investing? Maybe the funds are held in escrow, or you've invested the majority, yes. Is it a real and operating commercial enterprise? It sounds like a reseller, that your reseller business is. Have you invested a substantial amount? What do you need to run that business? I don't know. That's your business. We can dig into it though. Are you making more money besides just you? Like, are you employing people? Are you going to be paying a lot of money in taxes on this? And/or are you in the position to direct and develop the enterprise? Do you already have experience with that? Okay, great. Yeah, you can. You're well qualified to do this from Germany, where you said you're coming from, and then this one's more if you're coming over as a manager, and then you intend to depart the US when the E2 status terminates. So you have to show you have some ties back to Germany, and you're not just going to stay here indefinitely. And if you're going to apply for a green card, that you're going to go back to and apply out of Germany. But once this visa ends for the E2, your intention's to depart the US. So those are the requirements. So on paper, yeah. I mean, I haven't done a software reselling business for the E2. We've had an L1 visa client years back that brought his software resale business from Brazil to the United States, and we got an L1 visa for him successfully. I don't see why we can't roll up our sleeves and do the same for you, but for the E2 visa.
Thanks for that, Patrick. That's been beautiful. All right. I hope you guys are liking the video so far. If you are, please do press the button and give the live a like. Now let's continue with the 100K businesses, Patrick. So one of the reasons why this idea is being entertained is because 100K isn't an arm and a leg for most people who are thinking about investing, especially as opposed to the EB5, which is 800K or $1 million bucks level. This could be considered as a cheap business purchase. And I'm not using cheap here with a negative connotation, although the word isn't really a pretty one, but it is what it is. So there's got to be, well, there usually are a lot of red flags, right? Some people are able to see, some people are not able to see, but Patrick Findaro certainly can see those that are not readily apparent for you guys. So that's what we're going to talk about. So Patrick, what could be some of the red flags and some of the things to watch out for when our prospective clients are considering buying a business for about 150K that's already operational.
If it's being marketed to E2 visa investors, and the same thing with franchises that just market to E2 visa investors, that's a massive red flag. Because why aren't Americans invested in that business? That generally, if you're on the ground, you have more information. So there's a information asymmetry between people coming from abroad and the opportunity that exists in the U.S. So if it's saying, E2 visa eligible, get an E2 visa, invest in this business, semi-absentee business, absentee owner for 100K. If this is making 55,000, I would buy that if I don't have to work in it day to day and spend 5 hours a week. That's a lot of money. 55K, I get my money back every 2 years. That's a great investment. So why, if the person says they don't have to work day to day, are they selling that at such a high ROI of over 50%? So those are some of the red flags, as well as businesses that could easily be consolidated but are selling as individual. So you have a Lake Mary pool service route for sale. If this was scalable and it didn't rely on the owner to probably service the pool routes or sometimes jump in or really heavy on the sales, you would just have a private equity fund or a bigger pool service route that would just snap these up. They would buy that because there would be consolidation. Like that, look at that photo. That's cool. Like you're just, you're working in front of the pool with your shorts, and you're set up for Zoom calls if you need to, because you didn't leave your full-time job. So this is kind of, selling a false dream, probably.
Not probably. Look at when that business was established, Patrick. Pull up that business.
Yeah.
Okay, 2015.
2015.
That
So
business
it's
has been
doing what? Why is the cash flow so high? Is it just the owner that works this? That doesn't make any
no.
sense. $130,000 revenue. Like
That
what
business is for
businesses do
sale.
over like 70% margins? Like drug dealers, I guess, do 70-80% margins. I don't know who else does. Even like Google and tech companies, it's closer to 30%.
I guess one thing to look out for. I don't think Biz by Sell discloses this information. Is how long the business has been sitting on the market. This particular listing's been there as far back as I can remember.
I think you
But
pay. It's
look,
not that
similar
much, and
listings.
you
Go
get
down.
those stats.
Go down to the similar listings.
And it seems like
So
it's the same guy selling these businesses. So like, wouldn't it make sense for him to have sold if it was legit to like a competitor that can roll these up into some bigger company? So it's now $1 million or a $5 million pool service route company. So it sounds like this is like you're kind of buying yourself a job. Where if you're coming from abroad, you have $100,000 to invest, and especially if you're coming from like a developing market. Pakistan, I even put Turkey in that category. 100K, you can do a lot of stuff with 100K in Turkey. So, do you really want to come here and be the guy that's cleaning pools for the next 5 years?
not
It's
really.
something if it's like 4 months or 6 months of doing that, but 5 years of doing that in the hot Florida sun, that's tough. That's a grind.
You can't do much with 100 grand in Turkey. Let me put that out there. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Especially lately, no. You can open an ice cream shop,
So
but
ice cream shop in the US would probably be like 2 to 300. So you can't do
well,
something incredible in Turkey for 100K, but you can at least
no. Look, 100K doesn't go a long way in Turkey. It doesn't
yeah,
go a long way here in the U.S. for sure.
exactly. So I would say maybe it goes twice as far in Turkey, but that's not like incredible.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
another red flag, Patrick, is owners retiring for health purposes. Right? Okay. Oh, the owner's too old. He wants to retire. Really? All right. So this is amazing. I'm sitting out there in Germany, in Turkey, or wherever I'm from. I'm on Biz by Sell. I see this amazing opportunity, $90,000 cash flow in business, E2 visa. Owners retiring, health problems, this, that. Oh my God, God is really watching my back. So I am this very, very, very lucky guy from Germany. Nobody in Florida is smart enough. No,
Yeah.
no, nobody down the block, nobody from the guy's family or friend circle, right? But that opportunity is out there sitting on a website with a beautiful picture. Now let me just board the plane and go and buy that business and start living the American dream. American dream, that's more like an American hallucination, to be honest with you. That's not American dream. You're hallucinating, most probably. Um, but yeah, that's what I would say definitely is one red flag to look out for.
Convenience stores. Yeah, it's also, you don't want to take a step, like a too big of a step back. So we've had this with our friends from South Asia, where it was common for the previous generations because maybe they didn't speak English well and they didn't have the relationships, the know-how. But now the second gen are like engineers, doctors, work in technology. And we've both have spoken to people like that that are considering opening a convenience store, and they work in software. They're getting paid pretty well in Canada or the UK. And it's like, man, that's a big step back. Like, your parents probably went through that in Canada, UK, so you didn't have to, and now you're going to do that in the US. It's a grind to work and own a convenience store.
I think
There's a
it's a
lot
great
of
idea, convenience store. So the best thing is, here's the thing. I say this all the time. If you're gonna buy a convenience store in a ghetto somewhere, um, best thing to do is to set up a camera behind the counter and film the interactions to launch a YouTube show. Only
oh
then it
yeah,
makes sense. Because
exactly.
otherwise,
That'd be fun, man.
if
I'll do that.
there are some YouTube channels like that, and I watch them
I know the
sometimes.
one. There's one like
People
in
come
a very
in,
bad section.
yeah, steal
He
stuff,
just
and the
messes
guy
with the guys.
catches him, and he goes, "Oh, okay. Why don't you tell me you were hungry? I'm gonna give you that stuff for free." 1 million views on YouTube. That's great. Okay, that's a very viable, uh, instant gratification friendly, social media friendly business that could be done. However, if you're thinking about running a viable convenience store business as a software engineer back home and come to America and do it in a semi sketchy neighborhood without YouTube, that's going to be tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you want to aim high. You got to be realistic, but you want to aim high. Another like business we see a lot are trucking businesses. That clients come to us and they want to like buy a few trucks and have truck drivers, run the routes. And I see the appeal because you get an asset, and even if the business like goes to crap, you have that asset. And sadly, like I saw on our Instagram account, like when I scrolled through our Instagram account, all these ads were coming up for invest in a trucking business, 40% ROI, E2 visa eligible. And it's the longest running scam I've seen in the last 10 years of being in the E2 visa space is these trucking scams. There's one even says may apply for EB2 visa. So that's we know that that's a different category. I don't know if that business broker knows that EB2 is different than E2 visa, but doesn't show anything about the sales, which is kind of weird. Where they show EBITDA 146,000 and gross revenue 555,000, but no for cash flow. The multiple's 1x. I mean, this doesn't for me. This is just like doesn't make any sense. False advertising, and I don't know how that's legal. Frankly, like that's
Hold on,
ridiculous.
let's give this amazing biz buy sell listings a break. We have a question from Ashad, whom I spoke to yesterday. Correct.
Oh, cool.
Um, he goes, "Can I ask a question? It's not related to 100K business, but my special case of an IP holding company." Go ahead. You might ask the question, Asad. No problem there. We spoke yesterday with him, and he had a very interesting idea, almost like an R&D company. They were working on a particular license. And it's an operational company. It was based out of Italy. So we were discussing the possibility of how do we move the business here, but not the IP, not necessarily the IP, but maybe some of the operations here. Establish an entity here in the US, show substantial investment, meet all the other requirements, and prepare a viable E2 case. So I guess that's what the question is going to be about. But while the question is loading, um,
I can see the question.
you can see the question.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Or the question from Ashad, right? Can I ask a
Yeah.
question which is slightly not related? It's 100,000, but my special case of an IP holding company.
What was the question?
You can ask the question.
Yeah, we said that.
Yeah.
um, yeah. Well, I mean, until the question comes, the case is really about, I guess, a broader question, Patrick. Suppose that I have a company. This could be a technology company, R&D company, or something of that nature, and I have developed a product, a process, or a way of doing things, and got myself a patent. Can I come to the US and set up some sort of operations and get the E2 visa?
So we did a video interview with our client from Singapore, who you know well, who he
Mhm.
applied for the first time, um, and basically just cash in the bank and transferring the IP, and got denied. And then he came to us. We worked to fix the case, make everything much clearer in the business plan, and he was approved. But the IP was maybe a third of the total investment, so you can't just like have a business worth worth
All right.
$100,000 in Pakistan, and it's valued at $100,000, and you transfer that to the US entity. Technically that's allowed for a substantial investment, but the consular officers aren't having that fly. And maybe it could, count to something, but you still have to show, an extra 60K invested or 50K invested, maybe in marketing, equipment, hiring some American employees. For anything startup related, and, again, talking with Nitin, our former client and now friend of the firm, um, it's better that you already start the business and you're selling in the US, and then it's the last thing you do come to the US on the E2 visa. You already have a US company, everything's all set up, you're selling to Americans, and then that's the last thing. That's a lot more credible than if you just have kind of an empty shell of a company here. It's better to do as much as possible.
IP here stands for intellectual property, by the way. And here's Assad's question. If my IP holding company is sold within 5 years, then how would it work for renewal if I would like to continue with E2 visa in the US?
So that's something that you have to tell us, and we'll have the call with the strategy attorney, to maybe set up a two-tiered structure where there is a holding company, and the company that has the IP is, you have LLC A and then LLC B. The company that has the IP is at LLC B, and you apply for the E2 visa at LLC A, and we devise the business plan based on LLC A, and LLC B is part of it, but there's going to be other activity going on over those 5 years. So just put everything on the table to the US government, and you should be fine, at least historically for our clients. But for us to give like a decision, we prefer our clients engage us, pay the first month fee. We dig into the documents. We bring in a former consulate staffer that's reviewed hundreds of E2 visa cases. And then we start strategizing with a couple of immigration attorneys. And then we say, okay, this is what you need to invest further, or maybe you've already done sufficient investment. But it's hard to tell you like now or even over a 30-minute call. We've got to dig in and both roll up our sleeves to make this happen for you.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Patrick. And really, the trick here is structuring the business. Yes, we do need immigration attorneys. Yes, we do need an immigration strategy and prepare the case, but not every single immigration attorney is a business expert. There is more than one expertise that are needed for one's case, especially if it's the E2 visa. Yes, there is the immigration expertise, but there could be a CPA expertise that is needed there. And there could be an overall American business environment expertise that is needed there. And that is what visa franchise do. This is what we do. We bring all the expertise together under one roof and act almost like the general contractor of the case, and focus on a solution. And the solution is, okay, we want to establish a company, and here are the priorities. In maybe Ashad's case, this is, I want to get to E2 visa. I want to make sure that my IP is in another country. I don't want to bring it over here to the US. Okay, fine. And another priority could be, hey, look, I'm looking at a potential exit, and what's going to happen to my visa. Maybe we start a plan B from today in case that happens, right? So if these are the priorities for your case, then we look at the in-house resources or what we have. Okay, business intelligence we have, maybe even the CPA work, immigration attorney. What are we going to need extra? Okay, we're going to need maybe a filing attorney and a strategy. And we want to make sure that the attorney is familiar with our case, so that we start it as early as possible, maybe within the first month, so that up until the month mark, the attorney is really, really familiar with the nature of the case. Because it is, if everything's prepared and given to an attorney today, attorney may or may not understand, because most people don't know your line of business and may not understand your specific structure. So there is a lot of resources that needs to be invested, and we want to make sure that we set that from the beginning, from day one. Yeah, I guess there's no magic stick. My name's Alaattin, but I don't have a magic lamp. We can't just, hey, here's a copy paste system that will work for you. Maybe for franchising, yeah, but everybody's case is different. And we don't.
Yeah, it's
We
much
shy
easier with
away.
a franchise as everything's
Yeah,
dictated in the item 7. Every franchise has a franchise disclosure document, and by federal law, they have to show what the estimated investment is, and that's very easy to show the consulate officer as supporting documents. Like, yeah, this is what I need to invest. This is the business. But when you get into IP, software businesses, online businesses. We have great experience with online businesses, but it's new. It's relatively new, and the U.S. laws haven't really adapted to cover those. So it's trickier, but we have the expertise. We're willing to roll up our sleeves, but you have to be in it for the ride. That it's going to take more time and more of your time, depending on if the business is more complex.
yeah. Okay. Let's wrap this up slowly if there are no more questions. Um, okay, let's do this, Patrick. This is very interesting. When I first met you, we were talking about. I basically asked you, hey, do you have a lot of clients from Turkey? You goes like, yeah, I get to talk to a lot of people, but you know, generally the 30-minute call is to level the expectations. Now, what do you mean by that? So level the expectations because people have an idea of how the process would work, but there is the actuality of the matter or how it would work. So we really spend a lot of time, to leveling the expectation. So $100,000 business, somebody wants to buy it, get the E2 visa, as good as it sounds. And I guess companies like, not necessarily our company, but companies in our industry are to blame because they tend to rely on these social media ads. Oh, invest $50,000, get E2 visa, come to America, a beautiful family, beautiful photo of a family, wife and husband and 3 kids, and now in America, with $100,000 investment. As good as it sounds, it may or may not be the reality. So, Patrick, as you were leveling expectations, suppose that I am somebody who's interested in coming to America. And in my mind, this process is going to work like I go and buy a profitable business for $100,000, get the visa, don't spend much time, and then figure out. How would you level my expectations?
No, that was you. We did this. You wanted to make sure
I
I was
didn't say
real.
100.
You saw
I
me on
said something
YouTube.
like
You came to the
300.
office.
I
No,
said something
you
like
had a little
300.
bigger budget. Yeah, that's true.
I didn't say 100.
No, you're right. You had a bigger budget. But even then, it wasn't the right fit for you doing that.
Correct. Correct.
Um, I would say, if you have, say, 100K, it's much better to start your own business, or, start, if you know what you do and you do it really well and you're already selling Americans, do that. If you don't, do a franchise and have money saved up, 50, 80K on the side just to cover your family. Maybe a little less than 50K if your spouse is making money and able to work remote or is able to secure a US job pretty easily to sustain the family as the business scales up and before you can start taking cash distributions.
Okay. All right, Patrick. Thank you very much. And guys, thank you very much for sticking by this long. We're wrapping up the conversation and we are planning to do this every week. So let's do this. In the comment section below, why don't you give us some ideas of what to make the next week's live stream about so that maybe we could address some of your questions. So if you can comment them down below or on the side, we would appreciate those ideas and we'll take them on and we'll do a live stream of about an hour or so and come prepared if this is something that we don't know and if we believe that it's going to serve a lot of people's interest. Maybe we bring our immigration attorney, in-house immigration attorney, who acts as a legal counsel for us, can act as a legal counsel for you as well, to sort of like, provide the value. Again, thank you very much and looking forward to your comments. And Patrick, thanks for your time and have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye.